Hello and welcome to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire for another week. Now, it was brought to my attention, my name is Sam Meechan, I'll be your host for proceedings. It was brought to my attention by another guest in the studio this week that it's actually our 3-year anniversary. So for the next couple of minutes before we bring in all the rest of the guests, we're going to have a little reminisce over the last 3 years. Scott, it was yourself. I don't know if it was a Facebook flashback, a Facebook memory, or what was it exactly that made you realise that it had been 3 years since this very show started?
I think it was a notification on Twitter, if I'm being completely honest. So it was just a bit of a notification that popped up on there, just to remind us that it was 3 years. So pretty much I just decided that it might be quite a fun thing just to sort of reminisce over some funny interviews or some funny shows. Okay, so let's do exactly that then for the first 2 minutes of the show. What are your best memories from the last 3 years of the show? Pretty easy answer. I suppose the interviews are always the most entertaining aspects because you get to figure out a little bit or find out. I think as fans we tend to only find out what the clubs want us to hear when it comes to player contracts or how maybe players have got on when they've been at the club. So when you get to speak to those players once they've actually removed themselves from Hibs or Hearts, it can be quite sort of compelling to hear exactly what they've got to say about things that you maybe already had a pre-assumed judgment on prior to speaking with them. So the likes of Gary O'Connor, Michael Stewart, Kevin Thompson, it was really interesting to hear their side to some of the stories and sort of topics that we brought up. In terms of our own shows, I don't know why, but there's something about that show that we done after the abandoned game at Ibrox that I always quite like listening back to. I don't know if it was just Hearts and Hibs fans joining as one and just sort of, chuckling away at the whole farce of it all. Just being incensed as one. I had to laugh, because if I didn't laugh I'd cry, because I basically turned up, I think it was 18 minutes into the game, to see Osturk hit the bar and then be told to leave. So I think I just had to look at the bright side of it a few days later. So that's probably a personal highlight for me. Okay, fair enough. So, of course, if you go to Podbean, you will find an archive of all of those shows, all of the talking points from the last 3 years, all of those interviews. So please, if you feel the need to reminisce after Scott's wee bit of chat there, head to Podbean. You've got a full archive of everything to do with the show there. Let's stay with the subjects of threes for the opening question, guys. So, first and foremost, favourite number threes is something that Sean's posed on the Twitter this week. So that what you heard earlier was the voice of Jambo Scott McIntosh. We've also got Hibby Mark Smith, and from the Evening News we have got Anthony Brown joining us. So favourite number threes for both clubs. Scott, as you've started us off, let's go with you again. Who's your favourite number three for Hearts? I just had to bring up the options again because I remember sending it off to you last night. I think the top three I had Neil Poynton. So this is personal favourites. This isn't based on ability. So I had Neil Poynton number one. I had Takis Fisas number two, and I had Tosh McKinlay number three. Do you want least favourite as well? Because I'm pretty sure I did give you that. Least favourite might actually be slightly easier, to be fair. I like to veer towards the negative. Right, I didn't want three least favourite because it brings back too much PTSD for the good people listening. How about just based on one performance at Easter Road in the League Cup semi against Motherwell? Can you tell who I'm thinking? Would that be Sir Jamie McAllister? It certainly would be, yeah. That would probably be my least favourite, although I'm just trying to think who else would probably... No, that would definitely be my least favourite. It is amazing how one missed clearance in particular can change the entire perspective of a support. Okay, right, Mark, who's your favourite Hibs number three?
Well, I'm torn between this one. Henderson to deliver. David Murphy. There's quite a few on the list. Whittaker donned the number for a while. Ulrich Larsson. Jimmy Boko, I think back in the day, was a number three. So for me, probably number one Henderson, number two David Murphy. Okay. All good shouts, I think, actually. It's one of those things you never really think about the legacy of a certain position or the legacy of a certain number in the squad until you're asked to do something like this. You do a wee bit of research and you realise, well, certain positions have got a real strength and depth in terms of the options. Anthony, who are iconic number threes that stick out for yourself?
I think probably the last 15 years at Hibs, you'd be looking at David Murphy just because he was seen as a really cultured left back, wasn't he? Played in that Mowbray team, up and down, scored the winner at Ibrox, if I remember rightly. Speaking to Hibs supporting friends, he was always the one that they liked, and they almost saw him as a sort of unsung hero in that Hibs team, because it was the likes of Thompson, Rad and Whittaker that got all the praise, but Murphy was this guy who had come up from England and just slotted right in there and was a big part of that team.
Okay, anyone on the Hearts side, and anyone that sticks out?
It's funny, as soon as he said Hearts left back, the first one that came into my head as well was Neil Poynton. Maybe not technically the best, but just came up here again. Another guy that came up from England, I think slightly later in his career, and he just seemed to fit in really well with that squad. Gave it his all, just seemed to get the club. I actually interviewed him a couple of years ago. Was reminiscing about one of the cup finals. I think it was the 4-3 cup final against Rangers. And he couldn't have been happier to talk about Hearts. Still looks out for them, keeps in touch with a lot of the guys. Nice guy, really committed left back.
Good.
Did well while he was here.
Always good to hear, and one of the best football nicknames ever, of course, disappointing. Right, the one thing I wanted to say before we got a very quick ad break, before we come back to analyse the weekend's football, it was incredible to actually think that, first and foremost, that it's only been 3 years that we've been doing this, because it seems like an absolute eternity, even with that wee break that we did have. But it was incredible to actually cast your mind back to where both clubs were 3 years ago. That it was the start of it. We started about a month into the season, a season where both clubs were in the Championship. Hearts were just out the back end of administration. Robbie Neilson was a fledgling manager. Anne Budge, no one knew anything about her other than that at that stage she had just saved Hearts. Hibs, obviously, they just got Alan Stubbs in before the start of the season, and to be honest, we were all hopeful, but I think if we were completely honest, and Scott, you can back me up on this, we were all sort of expecting a season where the two clubs would scrap out for second and third, and we were thinking we were going to see the teams in the playoffs. As it is, we could never have anticipated that Hearts would have got back up at the first time asking by winning the league quite so comfortably, and we certainly would never have guessed that in the 3 year period Hibs would have finally ended the Scottish Cup hoodoo. Could you have possibly imagined that if someone had put that to you 3 years ago, Scott?
Probably not, and I think I remember being slightly frustrated just in terms of the context of the show that the Championship run-in sort of petered out in the way it did, because I think it actually probably didn't go right for us. I think we were kind of hoping it was going to be, more of a tightly run thing, but yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, it does seem incredible to think that was only 3 years ago. You think back to who was in that Hearts team then. I mean, Hamilton was obviously a squad member and maybe played 1 or 2 games. Jamie was just coming back for an injury as well, so there isn't many remnants of that squad. Hibs maybe a few more so, because they've tended to keep their continuity, which is something we've talked about as a positive for them over the last few months. So it is incredible to think that was only 3 years ago. It is. To think that when we did our first show, I think Scott Allen, for example, hadn't even made his first appearance for Hibs, and now you look at it, it seems like he's been gone a lifetime. He was loved for a period, now everyone hates him across the whole of Scottish football, as he was quick to tell everyone. It's amazing how things can change in 3 years, and it really just does show that if you take your eye off the ball for even 1 minute, it's a completely different game that you come back to. Right, on that, we will go a very quick break, and then we will come back to analyse both clubs' draws, but very positive draws at the weekend. So it's an upbeat show ahead of you. Thanks very much for tuning in to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire. We are Radio Saltaire. Music for Scotland. Music for Scotland. Music for Scotland. And we're back on Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire. Right, Scott, let's start with Hearts, because as you've been told there, my dad will stop listening if we start the show with Hibs for another week. But equally, because quite an odd week for Hearts. Quite an odd day for Hearts on Saturday, not in terms of the performance but in terms of the supporters' experience. It started to kick in, I think, especially travelling up and going beyond Tynecastle to a home game. It always seems strange at that point, walking the wrong direction from Haymarket, and it felt very much like a cup semi-final or like a European night because it wasn't at Tynecastle. What was your experience of Murrayfield? To putting the game to aside for one moment, how did you feel as a supporter being at a home game in essentially foreign surroundings? It was a little bit disorientating. When I came out the station, or Jessie Mays as it's called now, I had to take a right turn, so it was definitely disorientating in that respect. I hadn't been drinking, by the way, it's got nothing to do with the drink. It was just purely because I'm just so used to just turning left after leaving that boozer. it was nice. I suppose the weather did help because it was quite a nice day, but you could see that definitely the younger kids really seemed to enjoy it, and the fact that it was a bit of a novelty, and even just things like them just wanting to grab a drink or a bite to eat. It just, obviously the fact that it's something away from Tynecastle probably helped that experience for them. So I found it myself, once I got in there I had good seats, so I can't really complain about that. And then as we'll go on to discuss about the game, that obviously helped the experience as well.
Anthony, you got a bit of a feel of the vibe from the dressing rooms and both clubs in terms of your role as a journalist. Did you feel like there was any particular emotion coming from the club with regards to Murrayfield? Was it an exciting opportunity to get an increased attendance and extra eyes on the game? Was there a bit of trepidation that, but I think Craig Levein spoken a wee bit after the match about that he held a fear that the atmosphere may be completely lost in the game. How did you think the club was approaching Murrayfield?
I think in an ideal scenario, Hearts would have wanted every game to be at Tynecastle, every home game. There's no getting away from that. But on the other side of the coin, I actually tweeted about a month ago when it became clear that Hearts were going to be playing away from home until November effectively. I tweeted this might not actually be a bad thing for Hearts in light of the current mood around Tynecastle, because at that point they were still without a manager, there was still a lot of negativity from the Cathro era, and a few people shouted me down saying there's no good side to being away from Tynecastle. But to be honest, from being in Tynecastle at any point in the second half of last season, it was toxic at times, and I just thought it might do everybody, supporters as well, good to just not be there for a while. I know that sounds ridiculous and some Hearts supporters will completely disagree with that, but I just thought even the players, some of them will be relieved just to get away from that, because I know it affected some of them pretty badly and affected their performances. So I think they'd never admit it, but I think some players would probably have been looking forward to actually just getting a wee break from the intensity at Tynecastle and just getting a chance to express themselves. And by all accounts, I was actually at the Hibs game on Saturday, but it sounds like it was a really sort of decent atmosphere at Murrayfield and a lot more pleasant than many of the games at Tynecastle have been recently. On that subject still then, Scott, just before we go on to the tactics and the players and the performance itself, the atmosphere at Murrayfield, it's always a big point for debate about whether the atmosphere translates. I think it's a difficult one because it always depends which section you're in. It's that thing, if you're so immersed in the 30 or 40 people around you that you think the atmosphere is great, and then you go home and watch it again on telly and you realise, oh, none of that singing actually made it out. By all accounts, it did make it onto the telly. When people have watched it back on Alba or listened to the game on the radio at the time, there was a discernible atmosphere. Now, obviously 7,000 Aberdonians at the game, or 7,000 Aberdeen fans at least, at the game makes a big difference in terms of really making Hearts fans step up their game. How did you feel the supporters performed? How did you feel the atmosphere felt in what at times can be a pretty vacuous arena when it's half empty?
Well, I did re-watch the match on Alba late on the Saturday evening, and I would probably concur that the atmosphere did actually translate pretty well. Like you say, it was definitely helped by the huge travelling support, but I was obviously immersed in amongst it as well. I was in the middle of the East Stand, so it felt pretty decent for where I was anyway. And at the end of the day, I think the atmosphere is only going to be as good as the team make it with regards to their effort. And as we'll touch on in the show, there was 100% commitment, so it was obvious that the fans were obviously going to give a little bit back to the players due to that.
That's an important point, because there's all this debate about Murrayfield. The atmosphere was crap for the European games and things like that, but it wasn't. I remember the Siroki Bria game, they played pretty well. I think they won 3-1 and there was a good vibe at that game. Likewise, the Braga game, the atmosphere is dictated by the match. Sparta Prague was a disaster because they got played off the park.
Can you see half of it due to the fireworks as well, from what I remember?
AEK Athens, they got played off the pitch for long periods as well, and so those two games I think were quite flat atmosphere wise, and people saw that as a reason that Hearts got played off the pitch. But I think fundamentally it boils down to how well Hearts are playing, and on Saturday they obviously played well and the support reacted positively.
Let's talk about the team then, Scott. Did you have the moment that I think a lot of us did at 2 o'clock, as Hearts always do when they announce the team on Twitter, and you sort of look through the team and you go, okay, so Suter, Berra, Hughes, that's 3 at the back. Right, then there's about a dozen midfielders and then where does the shape actually fit in here? Obviously with Conor Randall having played predominantly as a centre midfielder for the team thus far, you initially plotted him there and then realised, well hang on, actually Michael Smith's injured, and I think that was a bit of a last minute surprise for everyone. How did you feel when you actually saw the team? Were you very surprised at the lineup that you saw?
I think, and this is probably a disservice to Craig Levein, I probably assumed that we would just go in there because we'd obviously set the markings out at Murrayfield to be specific to Tynecastle. I thought we might have went with a flat back four. So at first when I saw the team and I was starting to come down the numbers, I was like, so Suter will maybe play right back, because he'd done that once or twice with United, albeit not his favoured position. And then they'll have Sherlock at left back with Hughes and Berra in the centre. After about 10 minutes, I went, oh wait a minute, Randall played a lot as full-back. In fact, he's pretty much predominantly known as a full-back in Liverpool throughout his sort of youth career, and I thought, well, maybe they will go free at the back with 5 men across the middle. So yeah, it did take me a good 10 minutes. I have to admit, I didn't see that one coming straight away.
And even when the game started, I have to say, especially given that Hearts weren't, as has been admitted afterwards, were probably slightly overawed by the occasion, and maybe just taking a wee while to actually adjust to the tactics and adjust to how Aberdeen had set out. But to be honest, I thought even 15-20 minutes in, it was quite difficult to tell you the discernible positions that certain players were in. Now, as the game wore on, that became a positive, actually, that there was a fluidity and a movement and a freedom to the play that actually Hearts have not had in a long, long time, at least in terms of midfield. Guys bursting beyond the striker and getting up to support a lone striker that, when you looked at the system at first, I think there was a big fear amongst most that Isma Gonçalves is a lone striker, not his favoured position, and could have become incredibly isolated. In the first 20 minutes, were you surprised that there wasn't a tactical change made at that stage?
Not really. I couldn't quite put my finger on whether we were just a bit disjointed for the first 20 minutes or whether it was a case that we were actually going to be more fluid than what I would have given them credit for. A lot was made about, how we were going to perform and how we were going to, take shape as a team when Cathro came in. And it was quite strange to see that the closest I've seen us actually reach those heights was when he was away, when I actually thought we would maybe move ourselves away from that legacy. So I just felt it was more down to us being a little bit disjointed the first 15-20 minutes and maybe not knowing how Aberdeen were going to set up, because they've got so many options now from midfield moving upwards. They can kind of rotate things a little bit. So sometimes you could maybe look at their team and go, well, Stewart and Mackay-Stevens start, and they might go with a bit more width, or they play a bit more narrow, maybe have Rooney starting. So maybe that sort of fed into the first 20 minutes of the game. Plus we didn't know how Callaghan was going to impose himself. So again, like you mentioned about Goncalves, it would have been quite easy for Goncalves to have looked quite static and quite isolated if someone like Callaghan wasn't actually a member of our team.
Okay, there was a couple of debuts and a couple of actually big decisions for Craig Levein to make, to throw guys into a situation where they could have in theory been overwhelmed. Sean's posted a couple of those on the social media, so I'll bring him in a second to give us the feel of the supporters generally on how those debuts went. But give us your thoughts first, Scott, on McLaughlin in goals and Callaghan in midfield.
Yeah, so just starting with McLaughlin in goals, I'd obviously been keeping an eye on him just sort of during the warm-ups prior to the Motherwell game, and also been reading into some reports from people who had watched him play once or twice for the under-20s, and I think two things kept on coming up, which was his kicking and also his communication with those around him, especially at set plays. So I think they were two things that were probably highlighted about Jack Hamilton last year, and there's obviously been a lot of arguments about where that fault lies, but I knew straight away that would be something that would be improved upon. He didn't have a lot to do, and naturally he was even getting credit for saves that he wasn't even making at times, like that one in the first half. But yeah, again, it probably helped that Hughes was back in at centre half as well, but generally they looked a better unit with regards to that back five, and that obviously helped.
Okay, Sean, on John McLaughlin, the question you posed on social media was, is he now Hearts number one? Now we'll get into maybe the general performance of the team and how he contributed to that in a little bit, but is the feeling now, after a brave decision by Craig Levein to throw him in for his first start, potentially some would argue a slightly harsh decision on Jack Hamilton, but that's, I think, up for debate, is the general consensus now that he is Hearts number one?
It seems that way. I think most people had wanted him to get the chance to hopefully oust Jack Hamilton, given the opportunity. So it seems every comment we've had on social media so far has been positive towards that change. Me personally, also being a former goalkeeper, as anyone who's listened to the show has heard at some point me trying to big myself up. As you said there, Scott, the main parts are the communication with McLaughlin from the back. Obviously, it's experienced players in front of him for the majority through the three centre halves, but he was constantly telling them where the other defenders were. And every kick, even if one got shanked, there was no. Your heart was never a flutter thinking that he could shank this right to a player. He has that calmness and a confidence when the ball's coming to him that Jack Hamilton just doesn't seem to be able to command. So I think purely for Hearts having a settled defence at this point in time is a vital thing for McLaughlin to be in there.
I think just, going back to what me and Anthony have said about sort of the atmosphere and how that was going to be such an important factor on Saturday, the fact that Jack Hamilton wasn't playing would have been a positive for a lot of fans. And again, we can talk about whether that's right or wrong, but that definitely probably helped as well. So as you mentioned, there was one or two that he shanked in the second half, and there was one guy, now I don't know if he was ironically shouting Jack Hamilton or not. It's hard to tell sometimes with fans, but you could tell that the fans were a little bit more sort of accepting of those flaws compared to, say, there's been moments where we've played the ball back in the first minute, Jack shanked it and it's led to maybe a corner or a throw, and straight away you feel that pressure coming for the stands at Tynecastle. So I think in that respect it probably helped.
Okay, now before we let Scott overanalyse this one, let's go to exactly what our audience had to say on Ross Callaghan's debut. Sean, you asked how they rated it.
Yes, we've had different ends of the scale, all of them being positive but some being a bit more reserved than others. Andy F said, best Hearts debut I've seen in years, dynamic, aggressive, energetic, man of the match for me. Peter Jenkinson said, a very satisfying 7 out of 10. Big thing is there's room to improve. Once his fitness gets better, he'll do a right job for us, which I think people are going over the top on some of them, but I think it was a lot better than people expected for him making the jump up 2 leagues so quickly.
Okay, let's talk about the defensive aspect of a 0-0 then, which in theory is positive. We've touched upon the goalkeeper already, but I think the positive thing in terms of the goalkeeper, John McLaughlin, is that actually it's very difficult to make a real judgment on whether he's up to the job or not. First impressions are good, but he had so little to do that it's actually difficult to judge his performance on Saturday. One of the big reasons he had so little to do is that experienced back three in front of him, albeit Souttar at his age shouldn't be experienced, but actually in Scottish Premier League terms he probably is at this stage, they really thrived. I thought, Scott, that was the best performance that I had seen in a maroon jersey from Aaron Hughes. Would you concur with that? Yeah,
most definitely. I think what you get out of Craig Levine's side is even those first 20 minutes where you were slightly concerned about the lack of pressure up top and the fact that Aberdeen were fairly dominant of possession, you still had this feeling that Hearts had so many bodies behind the ball that there would always be someone there to make a block or a vital block when it was needed. And I think that's definitely always been a hallmark of Craig Levine's side, regardless of who he's been at. So you could see straight away that the likes of Hughes and that came onto a game probably just due to the fact that they're now playing under someone that they could probably make sense of when it comes to this, discussing that part of the match. So definitely seem to have an immediate effect, given they've only probably been training under Levine for maybe 1 or 2 days, some of the internationalists.
The three of those guys as well were coming off massive results for their national teams during the week as well, so they're obviously going to be naturally confident. Souttar playing for the 21s against Holland, and obviously Hughes and Berra did really well with Scotland and Northern Ireland, so that would have probably been a fact. I mean, confidence is a massive thing. Any footballer will tell you that, and to go in there after the results they've had, that's as good as they've had for a long time, those boys. And they'd have been on a real high, and the fact Craig Levine's the manager, as you say, organisation is not going to be an issue.
I have to say there was an element of that struck me with Hughes. I think in his last appearance for Northern Ireland he surpassed Bobby Moore's record as the most capped British defender of all time, and there was an element that I thought it just seems like he's really up for it. It just seems like he's got a swagger to his play that actually at times we've not seen it. He doesn't necessarily carry himself like a guy with the amount of Premier League appearances in England that he's actually got, because I think he's a guy who's really grounded, is a hard worker, was always the sort of for Newcastle, he was the guy who would be put in to plug a gap in the defence. He was never the first name on a team sheet, so he's never had ideas above his station, and I think that's really good for young players to see that even a guy at his level, he's not big-headed, but at times you actually wanted him maybe to turn on the class a wee bit more, to have a wee bit more confidence in his own ability. Although he's older, he's still got a level of experience that very, very few players have who play in Scotland in this day and age. So I think in that sense it was really nice to actually see a real sort of burgeoning confidence in him.
We probably made a mistake with that when we captured him last year. I think that too much emphasis was made on Aaron Hughes and the fact that given his age he should have been leading that team, when in fact if you talk about what he's like, he's quite an unassuming sort of character on the park, and I think a lot of what he does well is just sort of show a level of professionalism that the rest of the team can adhere to. So I think getting Christophe Berra in during the summer will probably mean that he doesn't have to focus as much on that, and now he can just concentrate on his own game, and that definitely seems to have helped at the weekend.
Okay, the full back area was one that looked slightly less assured prior to kick-off. You look at the back three, there's a lot of established players there, as Anthony's mentioned, international recognition for them. The guys at left and right wing back, possibly less of a reputation, a little bit more of guys who, at least in terms of the transfer dealings this summer, were the gambles. Guys who, if they come off, will contribute but don't look to be stars in the lineup. However, they performed, I would say, considerably better than that expectation would set out. I've seen online over the weekend, there's, as Sean's mentioned already, there's a huge disparity. Some people say phenomenal, best debut I've ever seen about some of these guys, or best performance they've ever had, and others say, well, let's not get carried away, they were okay and they were nothing more than that. However, everyone seems to acknowledge that both Conor Randall and Rafael Jelak played extremely well. However, I've seen a lot of back and forth over who was the better of the two. Now, ultimately, it makes absolutely no difference to anything, but in your opinion, Scott, who offered more? Who is the guy? Because I've got the looming spectre of Michael Smith in my mind, that he's been Hearts' best player up to this point this season. He's going to come back. He's played on both sides. Who is he most likely to come back in for?
Well, to be fair, a lot of the game focused down the right-hand side, and that was probably due to the fact that Callaghan and Cowie were offering themselves more down that side than, say, anyone over the left. So there was a lot of times where Shellac was up against two players, whether that be in an offensive position or a defensive. So I think by that token, Randall probably showed more, but I thought that Shellac, and he is someone that I've probably highlighted as a weak player within the Hearts squad just now due to sort of the way that he plays quite one-paced at times. I thought he actually played very well, particularly going forward. Looked a lot more comfortable. So I thought that both players actually acquitted themselves very well, and I think Randall's played right and left back for Liverpool, so obviously the fact that we can maybe try and alternate between him and Smith, and also Smith Brown, who was back on the bench at the weekend, we seem to have more options there now than we maybe thought we did a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, another area where in theory there were more options also was the midfield, because as we've mentioned already, there was kind of 6 of them all playing at once. Now, whether that continues to be the case will remain to be seen. There may be more of an attacking impetus, for example, this coming weekend against Hamilton, but we will see on that. The one person that I've seen major criticism of, and in general terms, the reaction, given that it's a home 0-0 draw, has been hugely positive to this game because of the things that we've touched upon a little bit, and we'll continue to touch upon that. There was a feeling that it was very much back to what the fans expect of the players, back to a tempo and an energy and playing for the jersey, which I know that Craig Levein said he had put a massive stress on in training, particularly this week. But the one person who's been coming for a little bit of criticism is Arnaud Djoum. How was your feeling towards his performance on Saturday?
He probably made the most mistakes, but I would temper that by saying that it's the most drive and commitment I've seen from him in some time as well. I think the problem he now has is subconsciously fans are probably now bickering over whether they're probably against him or Jamie Walker right for the off, regardless of what they do. And I think that probably does make a bit of an impression on how they're viewing him when he is actually playing. I thought he actually had a very committed performance. There was 1 or 2 passes that went astray, but he was very positive in the way that he tried to play, and I think that's probably what leads to mistakes from players a lot of the time. It's the fact that they're trying to do something a bit more dangerous and special than most others do. So I think there was that aspect to it, and I think he's just in a space just now where some fans have decided to sort of, hang every word on what he's been potentially saying to the media, although I think some of that has been a bit lost in translation at stages, and that's unfortunately maybe going to go against him until you maybe see more from him as an offensive threat.
I think the thing we've got to remember with Doom is 2 years ago nobody had heard of him when he came into Hearts. He came in, he almost shocked himself with how well he played at Hearts. He basically said, "This is the best I've ever done, I'm really surprised how well I'm doing." So you just wonder if he has peaked at Hearts, and it's not. I mean, I know it looks like there's a lack of urgency about his play maybe in the last few months, but virtually every single player that's pulled on a Hearts jersey this calendar year has slumped, obviously, since January onwards. Doom's been afflicted by it, Walker, all the new guys that came in January, Aaron Hughes and Ishmael were afflicted by it the second half of last season. They both look better players now. I think we've got to cut the guy a bit slack. He's got into the national team. He's got big ambitions. He's seen this as his last chance to get a move. I don't think he's been anywhere near as bad as Hearts fans say in general terms. He's had ups and downs. He's had games where, even last season, people say to me, when was his last good game? I thought sporadically he did have maybe 1 or 2 good games a month, but obviously people focus on the 2 games a month where he goes missing. I don't think that's necessarily down to the fact he's itching to get out of Hearts or anything like that. I think it's just he's maybe lost his way. He's maybe not capable of maintaining that consistency that people are now expecting of him because of what he did in his first season.
I think he's playing slightly deeper now than when he did when he first came in as well, so naturally the goals might not come as readily, and because of that again fans are just equating that to a lack of effort on his part to get in the box, but in fact that's probably why we've brought in Callaghan, and it's why Cowie's in the team to try and give that support. So again, I think some fans are just wanting an excuse, and of course if Jamie's now going to be committed to us for the next 12 months, they'll need a boo boy somewhere, so it needs to transfer over to someone else.
I think definitely that has came from Doom's involvement with the national team, because he plays as the deepest midfielder at a national level, so you can see why he would want to be able to show that week in, week out, that he is doing that, especially when he's, anyone who watched the Confederations Cup, he was dropping out the team towards the end of that tournament, so you can see why he would want to focus on that side of the game. As you said there, Scott, though, and we touched on a bit earlier, Ross Callaghan seemed to be able to break through the lines and get up and support Isma. Do you think that was passion of playing for the debut, or do you think that's how he's going to play going forward?
No, I think that's pretty much what you'll get out of him. I think he's pretty much a box-to-box player. What I liked about his performance was the fact that pretty much everything he'd done was positive, and he wasn't playing the simple pass. He wasn't trying to just get by having a 6 or 7 out of 10 performance and just sort of steadily improve as the weeks went on. He played like someone who had been a part of that squad for a while. And again, we don't want to set expectations too high, because he naturally tired maybe the last 15-20 minutes due to the fact that he's probably more used to playing a lot of part-time players, and maybe it's going to take him a bit of time to adjust to that. But I mean, like someone touched on, I found it hard to really come up with a better debut from a Hearts player, maybe within the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, I think the big thing with a player like Callaghan is, first and foremost, he showed very early on when Hearts were struggling that he was willing to put himself about. He put himself in for a few tackles.
Yeah,
he was maybe
I think John Souttar got booked for all those tackles that he was
putting in. He was maybe on the borderline of a yellow card for a wee period there. But equally, I think there was one really telling moment for me early on when I think Isma dwelt on the ball and the chance nearly went away, and eventually got a shot away and it got blocked, and I think it went for a corner for Hearts, and Isma's head was down. He was thinking, I've wasted a chance, and Callaghan straight away was over, encouraging, clapping at him, and you thought, as you say, Scott, for a young guy making a massive step up in level, that's not really his place. It's no for him to go over and cajole and encourage a teammate, especially one as like Isma, who is, he's a kind of bipolar figure. He goes from the highest highs to the lowest lows. I thought I was really good and telling that. We knew he was captain at Wraith Rovers, albeit for about 6 weeks of pre-season, but he is a big character, and I think that's one thing that Gary Locke had pinpointed, that he's a guy who'll come in and actually hold himself to standards that are already at Premier League level, albeit his fitness will improve with playing better players and being worked harder. But I thought that was a big improvement, or a big indication of where he is mentally, that he is holding himself to that standard already. And I know people were excited by it when Perry Kitchen came in, and away at Dundee was bossing players around and said a future captain, and that one didn't really work out. This one seems a wee bit more like a guy who's acclimatised and ready to step on and contribute for Hearts. Right, let's touch on the front line a wee bit before we wrap up on Hearts. Their failure to score, especially I think if you had only looked at the lineups at the start of the game and then the result at the end, you would think, oh, there we go, typical Levine performance, crowd the midfield and take a 0-0. Obviously, if you're at the game, or particularly if you watch the highlights, because I thought when you see the highlights, they're incredibly weighted in Hearts' favour against an Aberdeen team with that many attacking threats. Joe Lewis has been given a huge amount of credit, Scott. Is it a world-class performance from him that keeps Hearts out, or is it that Hearts need to develop a wee bit more of a killer instinct themselves? Where do you fall?
I think there was one or two chances we had where clearly you could maybe pinpoint slight deficiencies in our finishing. Obviously the Kyle Lafferty chance in the last 10 minutes, that has to be tucked away first time. You look at the Callaghan chance, I think if he keeps that low, Lewis has got no chance of saving it from that distance. So I think the height he plays at it makes it easier for Lewis, albeit it's still a cracking save. Let's not take anything away from him. And then obviously you touched on the Isma kind of half chance after about 40 minutes, and the fact that he really just had to roll Callaghan in. So again, that's more to do with not so much finishing ability, but just that bit of decision making, which sometimes Calvis has got a habit of sometimes playing with his head down. But yeah, a couple of minor things, but on the whole you have to really just praise the goalkeeper for his performance.
Anthony, just to bring you in on one point, a lot of people I think were quite surprised to see Kyle Lafferty warming the bench at Murrayfield. What are your thoughts on that? He was brought in where it was a pretty heralded sign-in, massively important sign-in, especially for a Hearts team who had been fairly goal shy and shot shy over the 8 months under Ian Cathro. Were you surprised to see him not starting in Craig Levine's first game?
I was very surprised at first, but then when you think about it, he has picked a team that's full of sort of workers first and foremost, your Cowies, your Callaghans, even your wing backs. So I wonder if he was just thinking, I need a couple of players with a bit of guile, and the only way I can get them in is to play Walker and Ishma. Because if you play Lafferty again, he's maybe not got the skill that Walker and Ishma have to unlock the defence. So I wonder if he was just wary of being too industrial, if you like, by going with a big target man, and just thought we can try and play between their big defenders in some way. But yeah, it was a surprise. The other bit of my thinking is maybe just try to give Lafferty a wee nudge just to get a bit more out of him. I mean, not that Lafferty's been particularly bad, but just to try and get him to kick on to another level.
I think it was the most headers he's won in a Hearts jersey when he came on after, so there was an element of that did seem to focus him in that regard. Scott, there's only one person really that we can finish with, and that's Jamie Walker. After the last couple of weeks, there's been so much speculation, as we mentioned with Arno Doom. He can't have a bad game anymore. There's no such thing as that. If he plays badly, then his head has been turned. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. Again, there's been a big split. I've seen everywhere from sort of 6.5 to 9 out of 10s on the write-ups after the game. Where would you plot him?
In terms of what he offered us, and playing as an overall midfield sort of 5. Or 6 really, yeah, 6 really. Aye, you would probably say that he contributed massively. His work rate was superb, and whether that's now, I mean, and I've been as guilty as the next person is saying that he's potentially had his head turned, but maybe just knowing that he is where he is for the next few months has kind of helped in that manner. It could be that Craig Levine coming in's helped. I suppose you just don't know. That these are things that you probably get a better feeling for when you're actually involved more with the team, but it was a marked improvement on where he has been over the last few months, and offensively he was a threat. He had a couple of decent opportunities and a couple of decent efforts, so depends how we maybe go. I think Lafferty will come back in the team at Hamilton, and you might find that one of those midfielders will potentially drop out, or wing backs, so it'll be interesting to see more from him in an offensive threat when we're maybe playing Hamilton and Partick over the next couple of weeks.
Were you surprised at quite how stark the contrast appeared to be in Walker's performance and his general demeanour from the game away at Motherwell to Saturday, especially given that a lot of people will tell you his biggest issue with Hearts is Craig Levine?
Well, to an extent, but then I suppose the whole energy of the Hearts team was different on Saturday. And let's be honest about Jamie. He's not a leader of men, and he's not someone who's probably going to come on a park and inspire the rest of his team. He does his own thing very well, and I think if he's got guys to the left or the right of him that he sees trying a leg, then he will probably move in the same direction. So I think we probably have been a bit overcritical about his own performances without really maybe taking into consideration the fact that there's maybe been a lack of effort around him as well, and a bit of lethargy and a bit of apathy amongst the team in general since Cathro came in, and maybe that has affected him more than we've been willing to give him credit for.
I think there's definitely a factor of that being at play, because if we remember I think it was after the Hibs game in the Cup, Jamie was one of the few that got any sort of credit out of that game. I think it was him and Sam Nicholson maybe that generally were perceived to have been the guys that at least sort of kept going. I think Jamie got made captain for a couple of games after that because of the way he seemed to be rising above all this turmoil, if you like. And then, to be honest, I've spoken to Jamie several times, and it engulfed him, just the whole negativity around it engulfed everybody. Don Cowie is probably the only one that was able to keep playing through it and keep his performance at some sort of level. But they're human beings, they're not superstars, these guys, they're Scottish Premier League players, they're going to get affected by it. Mallory Martin's come in, he's been engulfed by it. I keep going back to this negativity of last season, but that is a massive factor in what's gone on the end of last season. In terms of the start of this season, we've only seen Walker in a couple of games, and he was brilliant against Newcastle. He liked playing the open game against the quality players at Tynecastle. Elgin away, he's not going to hide the fact that he doesn't like playing those sort of games where players are just hit him all the time, take him out. That's obviously going to have and then Peterhead was a similar sort of situation, had a bad night there, got dropped, and then from then he's been, what was he back in for he missed the Kilmarnock game, he didn't even get stripped for that. Came back in at Rangers. It's a hard game to come back in, you can't really judge him too harshly in that. Motherwell, he's sort of mixed performance by all accounts, but again, he's not had a home game, he's not had a real run of games this season to be judged on. He's not the sort of guy that's going to, subconsciously I think everything's affected him, but he's not the sort of guy to deliberately throw his toys out the pram and things like that. I think now that things have settled down, you'll see a decent Jamie Walker going forward, and he will have bad games, but he'll also have good games as well. And I think he's got guys like Suter and Cowie who he's close to there. They're going to keep in his ear and make sure he's giving everything. Craig Levein knows the value of having a fit and fire in Jamie Walker. He's not going to deliberately rock the boat with Jamie by dropping him for any period of time. I think it's in everybody's interest just to get the best out of him for the next few months and see what January brings.
Well, that's certainly positive for Hearts. Scott, final question on this game. Is your feel at the final whistle? Craig Levein was interviewed pretty quickly after by BBC Scotland and sounded absolutely gutted. I think a lot of us listening, I have to say, I downloaded the podcast on Sunday thinking, well, this will be good, Craig will be buzzing after it and saying, well, unlucky not to win, but what a performance, and praising Ross Callaghan, and instead he sounded borderline suicidal, to be completely honest. Where were you on that spectrum?
As a fan, I was just happy to see a marked improvement, and that's all I was looking for. The result was a bit of a secondary issue, because for me a lot of where we're going to be this season is going to be played on or hinder on these 8 home games that we've got in a row over the sort of November-December period. But I loved the fact that he was so disappointed, because as much as our expectations short term should be quite realistic with regards to where we are against Aberdeen, and we know that Aberdeen have a stronger, fitter squad, more continuity, and a manager that's been there and helped shape a team over 4 or 5 seasons. Historically, we should be where Aberdeen are. So I like the fact that Levein's overall judgment on the game probably took a bit of those sort of factors into it. So I think he kind of said, you know, I'm looking at it tonight and I'm very negative about it, but tomorrow I'll probably be able to look at it as more of a positive, and that's probably how most fans would want the manager to see that sort of result.
What was the vibe like towards Levein from the supporters? Was there any negativity at all, even at the start of it?
Not really, because I tend to find that a lot of the negativity that comes online rarely reaches the stands when it comes to somebody like Craig Levein. I think a lot of the bite, the backbiting against Craig Levein, a lot of it is down to people who probably gave up on Hearts a while ago and are probably more now immersed in the Scottish side of things, and a lot of it comes back to Prague and the fact that he tried that formation for an evening and the fact that people will listen to the Red Tops with regards to that. So I wasn't that overly fussed about it, and you know that he's a strong and stubborn enough character not to really worry about it as well. But I didn't hear anything too negative even before the match coming from any of the fans in the pub.
I have to say, I think after it felt like a win, to be honest, walking out of Murrayfield, that there was the element. I had to say to the people I was there at the game with in the last 10 minutes, because there was a wee feeling of that when you've dominated a team so much and you've just not scored, that I felt the need in the 80th minute to start that conversation about, look, we need to remember, even if we lose this somehow, actually it's been a massive marked improvement, because I had that slight fear that Aberdeen sneak a goal on the counter-attack, Mackay-Steven beats a man and pings one in from 25 yards or something, and suddenly everything, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thankfully, because Hearts got a result, I think it was the good feeling was managed to be retained, but in actual fact it's probably gone too far the other way. I think certainly for Craig Levein it probably has, that I think that's maybe why he was so disappointed, is that desire to sort of temper things, to say, well, look, these are actually games we should be disappointed not to win, which is correct. But I think Murrayfield also helped to temper expectations, that it didn't feel like a home game. So actually, whereas a draw at Tynecastle in any game, you come away thinking, well, that's really 2 points dropped. Actually, because of how challenging things had been, because of Murrayfield, because of all of those, that all sort of that dampened expectations to the extent where a point and that performance was actually seen as more than enough, I think. So on that positive note, we're going to go a very quick break, and then we will come back with our analysis of St Johnstone 1, Hibernian 1 at McDermott Park. Thank you for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltire.
Music for Scotland. This is Radio Saltire.
Thank you for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltire. We are back, and we're going to go to Mark with a Hibs for the Hibs reaction to their draw at McDermott Park, and Anthony was there covering the game for the evening news, so we'll bounce back and forth between the pair of them and get their insight on it. So on the face of it, against a high-flying St Johnstone with an informed goal scorer in a venue where they're always difficult to play against, it seems very much like 1 point gained rather than 2 points lost. However, on the balance of play, I know that that's not necessarily how a lot of people felt about it. How did you feel at full time, Mark?
I was quite disappointed, to be honest. I mean, I felt that Hibs dominated the vast majority of the game. Looking back on the highlights, when you look at the pace and the drive of McGinn, Barker through the middle, and Boyle, they were relentless for periods of the game, driving at the St Johnstone defence. There was a lot of pace about the team. Their distribution of the ball was fantastic, created a lot of opportunities, and I think reading on a few of the other online media websites, possession something like 65-66% away from home, and Tommy Wright publicly came out after the game, and he had given a lot of praise for Hibs' performance, and not many teams will go there, have that much of a dominance over St Johnstone on their home turf. I think we had something like 15, almost 20 shots at goal, 5 or 6 on target, and we're unlucky not to take all 3 points, to be honest.
Anthony, Neil Lennon, from obviously a slight outsider's perspective, but someone with huge interest in it, Neil Lennon's been hugely positive recently, even though Hibs' results over the last couple of weeks have not necessarily been exactly what people had expected after that blistering start. He's still been hugely positive throughout, and I thought on Saturday he very much focused on the fact that the performance was of a standard that he would expect, rather than the fact that the result maybe was not what they could have hoped for in the end. What was the general feel from the Hibs camp? Were they hugely excited about the performance they had put in and the fact that they had dominated St Johnstone, or was there that slightly disappointed element of not capitalising on the dominance to get 3 points?
Well, I spoke to Effie Ambrose for tomorrow's paper, and there's definitely a bit of both from his perspective, a feeling that we've got to be happy to have come to St Johnstone, played them off the pitch sort of thing for long periods, but also massive frustration that they've not taken 3 points. I think with regards to performance, they did play really well. There's a danger of overhyping how well they actually played, because they were good, but they didn't absolutely tear St Johnstone apart at will. It was a good performance in the context of not many teams go to St Johnstone and play in their half for the majority of the game. But it wasn't like how you would envisage perhaps Celtic going there and playing them off the park and maybe winning 3 or 4-0. It was nothing like that. It was just Hibs I think with Lenny, I think there's maybe an aspect of we're the newly promoted team, just trying to bring expectations down a wee bit. Now, don't get me wrong, Hibs were the better team. They deserved to win the game on the basis of chances and general play. John McGinn was absolutely immense. The defence was solid, largely untroubled. Bartley and McGinn together were pretty strong against the St Johnstone midfield. Stokes was lively, Boyle was lively, Murray was energetic, but they're just missing that little bit in the final third. They're just not quite clicking yet, and that's something he's going to have to sort out going forward. I don't know. I was looking at that game on Saturday thinking they're crying out for a Cummings here just to lash something in, just to lash in a loose ball.
So in terms of the team that he picked then, I think that there's certainly a bravery to it, but had it not gone right, in theory it could have been looked upon as naivety, which is always that tightrope that football managers walk. But two wingers and two strikers, not an approach that we see often nowadays in any game, but especially away against a tricky opposition. As I say, on the face of it, very refreshing. Had they gone 1 or 2-0 down early, it would have been absolutely pilloried for it. What was the thoughts upon seeing the lineup and quite how attacking it was?
Well, when I saw that Boyle was going to be fit last week, I was starting to think, how is he going to fit? Because he likes Boyle. He likes Boyle a lot. He generally starts him when he's available. So how's he going to shoehorn him into the team? And not, he's obviously happy at the way they played against Dundee. So I thought, would he go with two wingers? Because Barker obviously played well at Dundee. He was one of the standouts. Murray and Stokes are doing okay just now. And then I thought, but you've also got Bartley, McGinn, who would all, and Slivka as well. He was carrying a wee knock, but you would expect them all to start. So he's got loads of little dilemmas to solve here then. But if there's anybody in that league who's going to try and play two wingers and two strikers, it's going to be Neil Lennon. He's got a wee bit the old school about him, and I like that about him, that he is still willing to play that sort of way. And to be honest, it worked. It worked for long periods in the sense that they got on top of the game. They were never overrun despite only having the two out and out central midfielders, and they looked pretty secure. But I love Dylan McGeer as a player. I think he gives Hibs that little bit extra, and there was a point in the second half where I thought they're right on top here, get him on the pitch just to unlock them. And then they put Swanson on, and he's had a few moments where he was looking like he might have done something, but he also had a few negative moments as well. But no, on the whole, it didn't really do them any harm playing that way, and I'm sure it will be a way that he'll play again in the future.
Mark, from a supporter's perspective, are you pleased to see the manager going with such an attacking lineup, or is there a wee more cautious part of you that thinks, we may come unstuck trying that all the time away from home?
Yeah, I think it's a real positive, and that's what fans pay to see, is a good attacking team, good attacking lineup, and Lennon will certainly deliver that for Hibs. My only niggle at the minute, and it's a word you just used there, naivety. I think there's been a few defensive errors that have cost Hibs earlier on this season. All 5 games we've started now, we've went behind to the opposition in the SPL, and we can't continue doing that. If we keep clean sheets, then we'll win games. But I felt O'Halloran's on fire. Liam Craig came on, he delivered an assist, get one over against his old club. But O'Halloran was unmarked at the back post, and with the wealth of experience that we've got in that back four, it's disappointing to concede those kind of goals, but we've done so for the past 5 games. So I don't want to be overly critical and dampen the mood. There's a lot of positive things going on at Easter Road at the moment. But that's one thing that just unsettled me a little bit, was once again conceding first.
I think with regard to that though, you've got to remember in the context of that game, it was pretty much the only time St Johnstone cut them open, so they were unfortunate that obviously it's got on the end of the hottest striker in Scotland at the moment and he's knocked it in. But I take your point, but at the same time, Hibs cut St Johnstone open a few more times than that. At the other end, does St Johnstone then get alarmed at how easily they're getting cut open? I don't think they do. It's just unfortunate that they did kill them with that one moment where they broke away.
Do you see there being any mental reason, I think is the only thing I can think of, as to why Hibs go behind in all these games, Anthony? Because it's difficult to say that it's a getting out the blocks issue, because against Hamilton it took until the second half for them to concede the first goal, albeit Dundee scored early, Rangers scored very early, but again at the weekend it was the start of the second half when they conceded. It was nothing to do with starting the game slowly, although they did, but they didn't actually concede. Is it a mental issue that Hibs need the challenge of going a goal behind before they start to before they start to feel the need to take their chances? Or
that's what we were speaking to Effie about for tomorrow's paper, and we did discuss that. And I don't think it's an issue with falling behind. Effie says that we're showing resilience because we're coming back from it, and people will obviously say, well, why are you falling behind in the first place? But I think you've got to take each game in isolation. In terms of Saturday, just before St Johnstone scored, Hibs had a great chance. I can't actually remember which one it was, but Hibs, I think they had one cleared off the line. They started the second half really strongly the first couple of minutes, and I think somebody else had a shot, and then St Johnstone have obviously broken away and scored. It's just, I don't know, it's just one of these quirks. I think if it continues to happen over 10 games, then it's obviously an issue, but I wouldn't be inclined to see it as a major issue at the moment, because the first couple of games, they'd lost 7th and 4th minute against Partigan Rangers, and then they've come back from it. I don't know. And then the other games, one was a penalty against them. I don't know. If it goes on a bit longer, then it is an issue, but at this moment in time, I think it's just one of these quirky things.
Is there a worry in the fact that Hibs obviously had the majority of the possession, but managed to have 15 shots and 13 corners, and yet only 2 attempts on target, and the goal comes from an own goal?
Yes, I would say it is. I think, coming back to my original point about Cummings, I think they're just missing that sort of clinical edge. I mean, Stokes is going to bring a lot to this team. He looks like he's going to be up to speed a lot quicker than he was the last time, and you can see his quality and his link-up play and just the way he moves about the pitch. So you can see he's a higher calibre player than what Hibs have maybe been used to, but he's not got that sort of fox in the box, and that's probably doing him a disservice because he's scored a hell of a lot of goals, but he doesn't seem to play like that anymore. Whereas Cummings would sniff things out and just lash them in. And Simon Murray can do that, but if Simon Murray's not at it, he can be a wee bit clumsy. And there was one where Whittaker burst in the first half, got to the line, cut it back right in the path. Cummings would have just knocked it in. Murray took a really bad touch and the chance was gone. I think little things like that they need to polish up. I don't know how they do that with the players they've got, because I think fundamentally it just comes down to that replacing Jason Cummings is going to be a tall order.
Mark, sorry, do you think it's possibly a sign that Simon Murray is finding it that wee bit harder to make the adjustment up to the Premier League level, given that he was scoring quite freely in the League Cup games at the start of the season?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, when you take the step up from the Championship to the Premiership, the quality of defenders naturally increases. Week in, week out, he's going to have players that will be tighter to him, possibly more physical players as well, and I think that will make it harder, and he'll have to be more consistent. But I think Murray's got that drive. He brings a lot more to his game than just the getting the ball in the back of the net. His distribution, his work rate on and off the ball, closing down players, and I think Hibs' strike force will come good. It's been a little bit of a lull the past 2-3 games, but all they need is to get one ahead at the start of a game early on, and I think floodgates might open. When you look at the end of the match, Boyle had a fantastic save from Manis. I don't know how we got to that. Swanson was clean through. He had Stokes on one side, Boyle on the other, and he, yet again coming back to this whole, is Swanson trying too hard to score. Just didn't get the ball, just didn't get his shot away. Maybe he was trying too hard against his old opposition, against his old club, sorry. But no, I'm not overly worried. I'm in a similar position to Anthony. I think another 8, 9, 10 games, if we've still not scored, then there'll be a worry there. But I think then I'll be looking for goals all over the park. If we can get McGinn and if we get Barker on the score sheet as well, I think that'll help.
I think going back to Saturday's game as well, for all the Hibs had a lot of opportunities, they didn't have that many clear-cut chances. It wasn't like they were missing. Stokes had one at the end that sort of bobbled up just as he was going to hit it, and David Gray had a volley in the first half. But out with those two, I can't remember any absolute sitters where you thought he's got to score here. St Johnstone are really good at pushing player. If they do give anything away, they make sure it's a tight angle or it's from distance, like Boyle's shot from the edge of the box, or even Danny Swanson's where he got in. He still had defenders in front of him or nearby. They don't give many clear cut chances away. So we maybe are doing the Hibs strikers a bit of a disservice by saying that they missed loads of chances and things like that, because when you break it down, there weren't a great deal of sitters. They got into lots of good positions and probably made the wrong choices at times. It wasn't like they were putting them over the bar from 5 yards every time they got them.
Is there any consideration though that maybe this is an opportunity to blood Matalevicius and maybe just change the dynamic up there a little bit?
Well, Neil Lennon obviously thought that in the 93rd minute. He put him on. Literally, you could tell the referee was about to blow his whistle, and he's obviously thought this is the last chance, we'll just go along. So he took Stokesy off and put Matalevicius on, and literally the boy came on. Goalkeeper took the kick, full time whistle, so that was it. But
were you surprised to see him not utilised before that point?
Yes and no, but I would have looked at that bench and said there was a few players I would have been surprised. I said to the guy sitting next to me in the press box, says surely McGeoch just now. But again, that's me coming back to my. I like watching McGeoch. I think he's a really good player. I think he makes Hibs tick. I think I would start him in every game, to be honest. I think as long as he's fit, he should be starting generally. But that's another argument anyway. But in terms of Matalevicius, yeah, I can see value in trying him. I could have seen certainly put him on for Murray. I wouldn't take Stokes off at that point because Stokes has got that bit of quality that he will get a few late goals here and there just with his quality. Whereas with Murray, it didn't seem like that much was coming off from him. He wasn't having a particularly bad game. He was energetic. He was offering something. But yeah, probably an argument for putting Matulevic. I still can't pronounce his
Big Davey.
That's why you're writing the words and know something to say.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we've mentioned Dylan McGeoch there a couple of times. In terms of centre midfield, John McGinn dominated proceedings by all accounts, as if to instantly underline just how important Hibs standing firm and retaining his services at transfer deadline day could be. Certainly no signs of his head being turned.
No, I mean, Lenny described him as world class in his Hibs TV interview. I think he was maybe getting a bit carried away there, but I can see where he's coming from. I mean, McGinn was the standout player on the pitch. He was. I mean, to be honest, we do features and what have you for the paper. How's John McGinn going to cope with this? And to be honest, I know before I even speak to whoever I'm speaking to that John McGinn's not the sort to go in a huff. I mean, I know there's question marks about Jamie Walker and how he's handled it all and what have you, but there's never any question mark over how John McGinn was going to deal with this. John McGinn's got ambitions to go to England or wherever when the time is right. He's probably itching to go as soon as, basically, but he's a level-headed guy. He knows that it's not going to do him any favours if he starts throwing his toys out the pram or downs tools or subconsciously lets his form dip. He knows he's in a good place. He's at a good club, in a good dressing room, gets on well with everybody. He's under a really good manager. He's in a club that's going places. He's only got 2 years left on his contract. He knows he's moving on soon enough. He just needs to keep doing what he's doing. And I mean, he didn't have the greatest season last year. Just needs to step it up a notch in the Premier League, and certainly on the basis of Saturday's performance, he looks like a man on a mission.
Right, Mark, one contentious issue that appears to remain in the Hibs lineup at the moment. Stephen Whittaker started again ahead of Lewis Stevenson at left back, and by all accounts looked a wee bit out of sorts again. Are you surprised that he appears to be the preferred option there at the moment, given that he's not setting the header alight? And we've mentioned him making a couple of uncharacteristic errors for a player with his experience. Do you expect to see a change there with Stevenson coming back in at some point soon?
I'd hope so. Lennon's clearly brought Whittaker up for competition for that position. He's an internationalist. He's got wealth of experience. Whittaker, in my eyes, was fantastic on the opening day of the season. One of the best players on the park, and he scored against Partick Thistle. Stevenson is a great servant to the club without a doubt. It does upset me a little bit because I've got a bit of soft spot for Stevenson. And I think he's been an underrated player. He's been through so much turmoil over the past decade at the club, and he's consistently delivered. He's got his weaknesses. There's no doubt in that. But as always, to attract the calibre of player like Whittaker, Stokes, we talk about taking Stokes off. We don't know what conditions these players have came and said, I'll join Hibs, but this is the condition that I'm going to, make, if I want to be playing football. So yeah, coming back to your original question, I'm not overly concerned at the minute. Players go through peaks and troughs, in terms of performances, but I think what will come good. You know, he had a good opening day this season, and you know, I think he's got those consistencies of performances. He's just been a little out of sorts the past couple of games.
I think Lenny values pedigree players. He knows what it takes to play at the top level, having done it himself. He knows that Whittaker's played for Rangers for several years and played for Scotland for several years. He likes players that have played at big clubs because they've got that. He likes Effie Ambrose, he likes Stokes, he likes Whittaker, and who else have they brought in of that sort of pedigree? They've got quite a few anyway that they've brought in recently. But I think as soon as he brings Stephen Whittaker in, you know he's going to play him pretty regularly. He's not coming to warm the bench.
Yeah.
And the fact that he can play both sides, I think what you'll find is they'll rotate him throughout the course of the season, because Gray and Stevenson probably technically are not as good as Whittaker, but they're probably more energetic and more, I don't know, more drive up and down, if you like, than probably Whittaker offers at the moment. But I think Whittaker's got a bit of quality that those two don't have, so it's Lenny will want the quality in there, and he knows on the other side he'll have the energy of Gray or Stevenson, depending what side Whittaker's playing on.
I agree with that, and you know, he's going to rotate between the three. If you look 2 seasons ago, I think we played the most games in the whole of the UK, something ridiculous because of the cup runs that we had.
50 odd games.
50 odd games last season as well. And Gray and Stevenson, they're getting a bit older now. You know, do they have that engine to go 40-50 games consistently without picking up injuries? You know, and maybe that's the whole balance that Lennon's going for. If he can get 30 top quality performances out of those players and actually just rotates them between, you know, right back, left back, whatever the case may be. I mean, Stevenson can only play on the left, but I think that's possibly the mindset that Lennon's got there.
Okay, right, I'm going to throw one sort of hand grenade type question at you to finish up on Hibs before we go to a mad 10-minute before we go to a mad 10-minute news roundup / weekend preview section. So on this one, I was trying to it's difficult with Hibs right now to gauge whether these results should be viewed positively or negatively, because they are positive in that it's 8 points from a tricky start to season and a step up, and Hibs are establishing themselves in these games and are edging the games, but are not necessarily picking up the points that reflect their dominance in proceedings. So I thought, from a positive perspective, I think games like the last couple, both Dundee and St Johnstone, away points in games that Hibs have dominated, I feel they're showing their top 6 credentials and their ability to match teams away from home. But the negative side is that they're probably showing why they won't necessarily manage to put a huge challenge into the top 2 or 3 positions, because Aberdeen and Rangers at the moment, certainly Aberdeen at least, probably would find a way to turn most of these results into wins. How would you feel about that? Are they looking at the same sort of position that Hearts are assessing at the moment, of somewhere in between 4th to 6th, and try and win that scrap, Anthony? I
think they are looking at probably finishing in that area at the moment. It's far too early to say that this is the way the season will go for them, because obviously they will find their way. They might even dip as the season goes on, but I think they should have more points in the bag than they have now. They should have had at least one win from the last 2 games. Supporters will say we shouldn't have lost to Hamilton at home, but these things do happen every here and there. But I think realistic, I would have said at the start of the season I had Hibs down as genuine contenders for 3rd place, because I like the look of the squad in relation to the rest of the league. I've been pretty surprised how well Rangers have responded the past couple of games, and it looks like it is going to be between Rangers and Aberdeen for 2nd, unless Hearts suddenly pull something out the fire under Craig. But I think realistically Hearts and Hibs, St Johnstone are probably playing for 4th place. I think that's the way you would look at it at the moment anyway, but all of that could change in a month's time. You don't know how it's going to manifest itself in the coming weeks.
Yeah, well, look at how much the landscape's changed in the last 3 years. If anything shows you that we might be looking at title challengers, you never know. Right, okay, we're going to go a very quick break, and then we're going to come back for 10 minutes of chaos as we round up on everything else and preview this weekend's games. Thank you for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltire.
This is Radio Saltire.
And we're back with Monday Night Football on Radio Saltire. We'll just throw these all to the panel. The little bits of news that's happened, I know that they're all really Hibs news related, but I know that Scott really, really desperately wants to come in on the last piece of Hibs related news that broke about an hour ago, so he'll get his teeth into that one. The first one, Neil Lennon's contract. No one, I don't think, was surprised. It's been going on for about the last 3 or 4 weeks that it's very clearly been going to happen. Both parties very clearly had a desire to make something happen, but he's now secured his future until 2020 at Easter Road. However, we know that contracts mean nothing when it comes to managers. How likely do we think it is that he sees that contract out at Easter Road?
Well, he's made it past 77 days, which I think De Boer's sitting on. No, I think it's fantastic. Shows the ambition of the club. You know, he's got a great platform. Dempster's clearly wanting to invest in him and his ambition, and he's clearly got a vision for where Hibs can be going. You know, we've got a great fan base. We're at a record all-time season ticket sales. So it's a statement from the club, a positive one. I think the squad are happy with Lennon and his vision for attack and play, and you know, the players are responding well to it. Paul Hanlon's already publicly came out and said he's delighted with it. So yeah, when you've got good loyal servants to the club like Hanlon on board, then I'm sure the rest of the dressing room will be there as well.
Anthony, we've already mentioned how quickly things can change in football, but it's very rare that I would put any money on a manager seeing out a contract in the modern day. But with Lennon's situation at Hibs at the moment, it does seem to be perfectly set up for everyone involved. Do you see him still being there in 2020?
As you say, it's impossible to say how it's going to look in 2020, but certainly I can see him being there for a couple of years yet. I mean, when he first came in, I was surprised he even was interested in the Hibs job, and when he first got the job, I thought maybe give it a year, win promotion and then look to move on, or maybe have a year in the Premiership and look to move on. But he genuinely seems like he's loving it through here. He's getting his teeth into this job. He's moved through here. He's immersed himself in things. I mean, yesterday I was up at the Meadows for that Helping Hands event run by Bradley Welsh. Brilliant event. And they'd managed to get these 9 high-profile Scottish players in: Lee Wallace, Kenny Miller, Christoph Berra, 3 boys from Hibs, Scott Brown, Lee Griffiths, and they were all officially invited. But I don't even think Lenny was invited. He probably was invited, but he wasn't the official ambassador. And he just turns up and he's there in his cap walking around in the middle of the pitch. He's just on his own taking it all in, but all the players are mingling in the middle. And Lenny's just walking about, just taking it all in. It's like he's just content with where he is. He likes the environment through here. He feels like he can be himself a bit more than he probably could in Glasgow. And I think he's been to Bolton, he's had his fingers burnt. He knows there's no real security down in England. Whereas here, if he hits a bad patch, he knows he's going to get 3-4 months to ride it out, and he knows he's got the managerial nous to ride it out, and he knows he's got the resources at Hibs where things are going to come good eventually. I think he's enjoying himself here. He's got a good group of players. He's sensing a real opportunity to shake things up, maybe compete with Rangers and Aberdeen and Hearts. I mean, he's realistic enough to know that Celtic are miles ahead at the minute, but I think if he could get Hibs into a challenging position in second, he'd want to do what Derek McInnes has done at Aberdeen over the past few years and establish himself in second, and then he might look to move on sometime down the line. But I don't think there's any hurry from him to get out of Hibs. I think he's intending to see out the contract as things stand.
I think he's someone who's spoken as well a lot about his personal struggles as well, so it does seem like he puts a really high value on just being happy and content, and I think that is what he comes across in, even after disappointing results, as we mentioned in post-match interviews and press conferences. He just seems really content with life, and I think that is what makes me think that actually if another job comes along, then yes, it maybe comes along with a better salary and more recognition, but also a lot more added pressure, and maybe he's actually just happy where he is for the time being, which I think is positive for all involved. Right, very quickly, Darren McGregor's injury, less positive news. Last week, Mark, you told me that he was one of a list. I think he went as high as about 5 players that Hibs couldn't do with it, but he was on the list even when you whittled it down. How disappointing is it that you'll be without him for about 6 weeks?
Yeah, I'm personally devastated by that news. I'm a big fan of McGregor. I think he's been one of our top players over the past 3 seasons to help deliver the consistency of performance that have been needed to get us promoted and be competing. And I touched upon that last week. One of our key things is keeping these players fit. And losing McGregor, it's disappointing.
Okay, right, Scott, I'm going to give you 1 minute to go on this. Hibs' reaction to the EBT, they're the first Premier League Premiership club out with Celtic to put out any sort of noticeable statement on the EBT situation. So what they've said very quickly is, your board believes our game faces a choice. We either continue to spend significant sums of money and huge reserves of time and energy to challenge already lengthy and detailed legal advice, or we can focus on doing all we can to invest in the future of our club and the wider game to improve our sport and ensure there can be no repeat of the issues raised. We prefer the latter option, working to ensure that in the future our game is fairer and more open and has the potential to secure greater commercial income to fund further improvement for the longer term. So essentially, Scott, they would prefer to draw a line under things and move on and spend the money elsewhere. What would you prefer, and what is your reaction to Hibs putting their support so fervently behind moving on?
I would applaud that statement 100%. I actually think that let's just draw a line under it. I don't want other clubs to start getting involved in this endless pandering to Celtic fans that Peter Walwell decides to get involved in every few months. I think it deflects away from some of the other news articles with regards to, you know, some of the chanting that was going on at the Celtic Hamilton game, that BT Sport have had to, you know, actually come out and admit that they were actually lowering the tone of the volume with regards to that broadcast. I just think that the only people who suffer when it comes down to EBTs, or when Hearts were, you know, that 15-point deduction back in 2013, is the fans and the staff that are left after the mess. I would like to see more preventive measures and proactive measures being placed now by the Scottish footballing authorities, rather than reacting to things when they do go wrong. I would have looked at the SPFL and said, well, why isn't due diligence being made with regards to Dave King coming in? We all know that he's got rather iffy, allegedly, issues in the past.
Your minute's up. We can take this up another time. But thank you for your soapbox. Right, very quickly, we've got 1 minute to do incredibly quick predictions for the weekend's game. So Hibs are at Easter Road against Motherwell. Anthony, predictions for that game?
Very hard game. Motherwell going well. I think Hibs might struggle to get a victory. I'll go 1-1.
Mark?
Convincing win, 3-0 Hibs.
Okay, key men between the two years. One particular guy.
Luke for Motherwell, obviously, and for Hibs, he's not going to play with Dylan McGeer, but I suppose John McGinn in his absence.
Okay, Mark, any thoughts on the key man?
Barker and Boyle for their pace.
Okay, Sean and Scott, very, very quickly. Hearts are away to Hamilton. Does the Craig Levine improvement continue?
It does. 2-0 win for Hearts.
Key man?
Lafferty.
Scott?
I echo that 2-0, and I think Goncalves.
Perfect. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for listening at home. Stay tuned for Mitch Stevenson's Melodic Rock Show on Radio Saltire. Cheers.